Listen up, because what I'm about to say will impact every single one of you watching this. Whether you own a property, you're trying to purchase one, or you're currently renting, this absolutely applies to you. There is a real estate dilemma unfolding across America, and it isn't just concerning, it's catastrophic. Before I dive into the statistics, before I illustrate precisely why this will strain your finances more intensely than anything in recent memory, I need you to take one action. Press that subscribe button right this second. Commit to it. If you value your financial health, if building lasting wealth matters to you, you must join this community. We are committed to unfiltered honesty here. No soft pedaling, no distractions, just raw facts and financial clarity. Now, let's begin. With over 4 decades in business, I've constructed companies and directed hundreds of millions in investments. I've observed markets plummet, and I've witnessed them soar. What I'm telling you today is that the current situation in American real estate is unprecedented in my entire professional history. We are facing a looming disaster that the majority of people haven't even recognized yet. But I recognize it, and by the conclusion of this video, you will too. Here is the truth. The core of the American aspiration has always revolved around a single objective: owning your own residence. You labor diligently, you accumulate savings, you purchase a house, you build equity, and you leave a legacy for your children. That's how the process is intended to function. That's the path my generation followed. That's likely how your parents achieved it. Yet for countless younger Americans today, that aspiration has vanished. It's not due to laziness. It's not because they're overspending on luxury coffees. It's because the fundamental system is fractured. Let me present the figures because numbers are unequivocal. At this moment, the median home price in America is approximately 7 times the median household income. 7 times. Do you know what that ratio was in the early 2000s? Roughly 4 times. And in the 1970s? About 2.5 times. Do you perceive the trend? Housing prices have become utterly detached from what ordinary people actually earn. When you sever the link between price and income, you create a speculative bubble. And bubbles, without exception, inevitably burst. However, this situation diverges critically from the 2008 crisis. Back then, the issue was a subprime mortgage catastrophe. Financial institutions were extending loans to individuals who couldn't manage them. The entire structure was built on unstable foundations. Its collapse was brutal, but at least the problem was identifiable: toxic loans. This time, the core issue is supply. We have an insufficient number of houses. We are not constructing enough residences, and the properties that do exist are being acquired by individuals and entities with no plan to inhabit them. Allow me to clarify the principle of supply and demand as its fundamental economics, though seemingly misunderstood in Washington. When the number of buyers exceeds the number of available houses, prices escalate. It's simple arithmetic. Presently, in America, millions of people wish to purchase homes, but we lack the inventory. We are deficient by millions of housing units. Certain analyses indicate we need to erect 5 million new homes merely to reach an adequate baseline. 5 million. And we are nowhere near building at that required velocity. Why aren't we building more? An excellent question. Let me explain. First, construction has become prohibitively costly. Material expenses have skyrocketed. Lumber, steel, concrete, every component has surged in price. Labor has also grown significantly more expensive. When your input costs rise, the final product's price inflates accordingly. Therefore, even if builders desire to create affordable housing, the financials are untenable. They cannot profit from it. Second, regulatory barriers. I am not suggesting we eliminate building codes or safety standards. However, in numerous cities and states, the regulatory load is so immense, so sluggish, and so costly that it adds years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to every single project. Outdated zoning regulations from half a century ago no longer align with modern needs. Environmental reviews drag on indefinitely. Local politicians may verbally support affordable housing, yet they obstruct every proposed development in their districts because they oppose it in their immediate vicinity. Third, land scarcity. In the urban centers where people genuinely want to reside, where the employment opportunities are, available land is virtually non-existent, and the parcels that are accessible command exorbitant prices. Consequently, developers are trapped. They cannot build in desirable high-demand areas due to cost, and if they construct in affordable regions, few wish to relocate there due to a lack of jobs. The result? A market where supply is utterly incapable of meeting demand. When that occurs, prices detonate. This is precisely the phenomenon we've observed over the past several years. Now, let's discuss who benefits in this environment. It is not the young couple attempting to purchase their first home. It is not the family striving to upgrade to a larger space. The winners are the investors, the institutions, the individuals and corporations with immediate capital who can outbid everyone else. I'm referring to private equity firms. I'm referring to hedge funds. I'm referring to international investors. They view American real estate as a secure harbor for their capital, and they are acquiring properties by the thousands. Here is the startling reality. Many of these investors aren't even renting these properties out. They are merely holding them. They are treating houses like stock certificates: acquire, hold, await appreciation, sell. Meanwhile, the homes remain vacant. So we now face a housing shortage compounded by homes being entirely withdrawn from the market to serve as financial instruments. It is irrational. This dynamic is forging a generation of perpetual renters. Individuals who would have been homeowners 3 decades ago are now trapped renting because purchasing is unattainable. And renting is not inexpensive either. Rental rates have surged nearly as rapidly as home prices. People are paying $2,000 monthly in rent, money that vanishes without return. It does not build equity. It does not build wealth. It merely enriches another party. Consider the broader economic impact. When people cannot afford to purchase homes, they do not spend on the ancillary aspects of home ownership. They don't buy furniture. They don't buy appliances. They don't hire local contractors. They don't invest in their communities. Home ownership constitutes the bedrock of middle-class wealth in this nation. Erode that foundation and you gut the middle class. Observing young people today, individuals in their 20s and 30s, I see them laboring intensely, doing everything correctly, yet still failing to advance. They carry student debt, auto loans, and credit card balances. Now they are informed that to buy a house, they must amass a $100,000 down payment. Where are they supposed to obtain that? It is an unrealistic expectation. This is why I am so impassioned about this issue. It transcends real estate. It concerns the future of the country. If we don't rectify this, we will produce an entire generation that never accumulates wealth. When people cannot build wealth, they grow resentful. They become disillusioned. They lose faith in the system, and that is perilous. Now allow me to explain where this situation turns truly dire. What I've described so far is severe enough, but there is an additional, often overlooked dimension that will determine whether America remains a land of opportunity or devolves into a nation of landlords and tenants. We must discuss who profits from this crisis and why those in authority are failing to intervene. Let's begin with the investors I mentioned. When I state institutional investors are purchasing homes, I am not referring to small-scale landlords owning a couple of rentals. I mean colossal corporations controlling billions in capital. These entities execute a strategy that is brilliant commercially, but disastrous for everyday Americans. They enter markets, pinpoint undervalued properties or areas poised for growth, and acquire everything accessible. They pay in cash, close swiftly, and consistently outbid families. How can they do this? They possess access to inexpensive capital. They borrow at interest rates unattainable for ordinary citizens. They have banking relationships and investor backing, and they can absorb losses on individual properties because they are executing a long-term strategy, assembling portfolios of thousands of homes. Once they control enough property in a market, they wield pricing authority. They can set rental rates and dictate terms. It is a monopoly in practice, with real people being squeezed. What infuriates me is that our financial system endorses this activity. Banks adore these deals because they involve massive loans. Wall Street loves them because rental incomes can be bundled into securities and sold. Everyone profits except the individuals who simply need a place to live. Understand my perspective. I am a capitalist. I believe in free markets. I believe in generating profit. But I also believe markets must function for everyone, not solely those at the apex. When average people cannot compete because the system is skewed toward institutions, that isn't true capitalism. It is a distortion, and it is unsustainable. Consider a tangible example. Neighborhoods and cities exist across America where 30, 40, even 50% of homes are investor-owned. Reflect on what that does to a community. When half the neighborhood consists of rentals, community investment evaporates. Residents cycle in and out. Stability is absent. Properties are not maintained with an owner's care. The neighborhood's entire character transforms, and the property values of remaining homeowners suffer. It is a corrosive cycle. Now let's address interest rates, where the Federal Reserve enters the picture. For years, we experienced near-zero interest rates. This was advantageous for borrowers, but detrimental for savers. A separate discussion. Those low rates made borrowing to buy real estate incredibly cheap. The outcome? Everyone who could borrow did borrow. Investors borrowed. Individuals borrowed. Prices soared because capital was inexpensive. Then inflation surged. The Fed raised rates to cool the economy. Now mortgage rates are triple what they were just a few years ago, creating a new dilemma. Homeowners who secured low-rate mortgages are trapped. They have loans at 3 or 3.5%. They will not sell because purchasing a new home would mean a mortgage at 7 or 8%. They stay put, further reducing market inventory. Consequently, we now have elevated prices, minimal inventory, and high interest rates simultaneously. It is a perfect storm. If you are attempting to buy now, you are pressured from all sides. Homes are overpriced, availability is scant, and borrowing costs are astronomical. It feels nearly impossible. And who is most severely impacted? First-time buyers, young families, individuals trying to transition from a small apartment to a house suitable for raising children. These are the people being excluded from the market. Meanwhile, established investors are in an enviable position. Their assets appreciate, they collect rent, and they generate substantial profits. This leads to the policy dimension, where my frustration intensifies. We have politicians who publicly champion affordable housing. They deliver speeches and make pledges. Yet when action is required, they do nothing, or worse, implement measures that exacerbate the problem. Consider examples like rent control. I comprehend why it seems appealing. People see rising rents and want tenant protection. But the actual consequence is that landlords cease investing in properties because they cannot raise rents to cover costs. Developers halt new rental construction because profitability vanishes. The result is less housing, not more. It's fundamental economics ignored for political expediency. Then examine zoning laws. I mentioned them earlier, but let's delve deeper. In most U.S. cities, the majority of residential land is zoned exclusively for single-family homes. Constructing apartment buildings, duplexes, or any multi-unit housing is prohibited. This might have made sense 70 years ago, but today, when we urgently require density and more housing in desirable areas, these regulations are suffocating progress. Who opposes reforming these zoning laws? Existing homeowners. They fear new development will lower their property values or alter their neighborhood's character. They attend city council meetings and block proposals. Politicians heed them because they vote consistently. Meanwhile, those needing housing, the youth, the renters, are often disorganized and absent from these meetings, so their perspectives are unheard. This exemplifies a broken system. The incentives are misaligned. Those with power benefit from housing scarcity. Those needing housing lack influence, so stagnation persists. Let me outline what must occur, and I will be direct. We need to build. We need to construct millions of homes. We must simplify, accelerate, and reduce the cost of construction. This entails eliminating bureaucratic obstacles, reforming zoning codes, and investing in infrastructure to enable new community development. It means, in some instances, reducing government obstruction, and in others, increasing public involvement. This may sound contradictory, but here's my meaning. Government must cease hindering development with needless regulations, yet it must also fund essential infrastructure, roads, water systems, public transit, that makes new communities viable. Private developers cannot accomplish this alone. It requires public investment. We also need a candid discussion about who should be permitted to purchase residential real estate. I am not advocating an outright ban on foreign or institutional investment, but perhaps we require sensible boundaries. Perhaps we need limits on the percentage of a neighborhood that investors can own. Perhaps we need tax advantages for first-time home buyers and tax disincentives for entities that purchase homes purely for speculative flipping or leaving them vacant. Some will label this government overreach, arguing the market should decide. But the market is deciding, and its verdict is that ordinary people lose. Maybe we need to recalibrate the scales slightly to favor those who actually intend to live in these homes. Here is the essential conclusion. We stand at a crossroads. We can continue on this path where housing grows increasingly unaffordable, ownership becomes a privilege of the wealthy, and an entire generation is barred from wealth accumulation. Or we can make difficult choices. We can modify policies. We can prioritize housing as a critical national issue. But this demands leadership, something currently in short supply. What occurs if we fail to act? What does America resemble in 10 or 20 years if this trajectory continues? Let me depict that future, and I assure you it is unsettling. But you must hear it, because this is our destination without immediate correction. Envision an America where home ownership is exclusive to the upper class, where the middle class, the nation's backbone, is reduced to permanent renters, where your children and grandchildren will never own a home regardless of their effort. This is not dystopian fiction. It is the reality we are crafting through present decisions. When home ownership rates fall, wealth inequality surges. This isn't an abstract economic notion. It is tangible wealth determining whether your children attend college, whether you retire with dignity, whether you have a legacy to bequeath. For most Americans, their home is their primary asset, their vehicle for wealth building. Remove that and they possess nothing, a lifetime of labor yielding zero net worth. Let's examine the mathematics, because numbers are unequivocal. Suppose you rent for $2,000 monthly. Over 30 years, you pay $720,000 in rent and own nothing, zero. Conversely, if you buy a house with a mortgage, your monthly outlay might be similar, factoring in taxes and maintenance, but after 30 years, you own an asset that is likely appreciated. Even with modest growth, you accumulate hundreds of thousands in equity. That is the divergence between a secure retirement and financial hardship. This crisis harbors an even more pernicious effect. When people cannot afford homes, they often cannot afford families. I am serious. Examine the data. U.S. birth rates are declining. People marry later and have fewer children. A primary reason cited is financial instability. They cannot afford a home, so they cannot afford children, living in cramped apartments or with roommates into their 30s. This has profound implications for our economy, society, and future. Who will fund Social Security with fewer young workers? Who will purchase the goods and services driving our economy? Who will care for an aging population? We are crafting a demographic time bomb that remains undiscussed. Now consider the social ramifications, because this transcends finances. When a society features a small ownership class and a majority struggling to get by, it fosters resentment and anger. Trust in institutions erodes. People believe the system is rigged, and currently they are correct. I have visited nations where this is reality. A narrow, wealthy elite and widespread struggle. These are not stable societies. They exhibit high crime, low trust, and institutional disillusionment. Is this our desired future for America? Because it is our trajectory unless we awaken. The most aggravating aspect is that this crisis is preventable. This isn't a natural catastrophe beyond our control. It is a human-made disaster born from flawed policies, regulatory capture, and prioritizing few over many. Therefore, we can rectify it, but only with collective resolve. So let me specify what you must do, you, the viewer. First, educate yourself. Do not rely solely on my analysis. Investigate the data. Comprehend your local market dynamics. Knowledge empowers, and you must understand the challenge. Second, if you are positioned to buy, proceed. I acknowledge it's expensive and daunting, but if you can enter the market, even with a small condo or a home in a less sought-after area, do it. Renting indefinitely is financial self-sabotage. Build equity now. Short-term sacrifices yield long-term rewards. Third, if you are currently excluded, do not surrender. Save aggressively. Reduce expenses. Develop a side income. Do whatever necessary to accumulate a down payment. It feels impossible, but people achieve it through discipline and sacrifice. Research first-time homebuyer programs. Grants, low-interest loans, assistance initiatives exist. Diligence is required, but resources are available. Fourth, and crucially, engage politically. Regardless of party affiliation, this issue should unify us all. Attend city council meetings. Question your representatives on housing policy. Support candidates with concrete plans to expand housing supply. Hold them accountable. Politicians respond to pressure, but only if we exert it collectively. We must demand zoning reform, streamline permitting, infrastructure investment, incentives for affordable construction, and sensible restraints on institutional investors distorting the market. I am not naive. Policy change is arduous, and vested interests defend the status quo. But we possess numerical strength. Millions are harmed by this crisis. Through organization and unified voice, we can compel change. It begins with you, with individuals refusing to accept this reality. Now, to the homeowners watching, some may think, my home's increased value benefits me. On paper, yes, your wealth has grown. But consider, do you have children or grandchildren? They are the ones disadvantaged by this dynamic. Your home equity diminishes in significance if your descendants cannot afford their own homes. Ponder the world you bequeath them. Reflect on your community. Do you desire a neighborhood of transient renters where no one invests in long-term improvement? That is the outcome of unaffordable ownership. Your property value may rise temporarily, but quality of life deteriorates. Homeowners must contribute to the solution. Support new housing developments, even nearby. Recognize that increased density and more units are not threats, but necessities to ensure the next generation has opportunity. Let me conclude as I've shared substantial information. Remember this: America confronts a real estate crisis jeopardizing middle-class prosperity. Prices are exorbitant, supply is inadequate, and leadership is insufficient. Without immediate action, we will establish a permanent renter class, eviscerate the middle class, and fundamentally alter the American identity. But it doesn't have to be this way. We can repair this. We can build more housing, enhance affordability, and preserve the dream of home ownership for future generations. However, it demands our collective engagement. It demands we insist on change. It demands we hold leadership accountable. This channel is dedicated to truth about money, business, and the economy. The truth is, we are in peril. Yet I retain faith in this nation and its people. I believe that once we acknowledge a problem, we possess the capability to resolve it.